Travel and Things in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions presents In Conversation With. I'm your host, David Batsoffen, and my guest today, talking about her brand new book, Love and Above, is Sarah Bullen. Sarah, good morning. Welcome to you.
Morning, David, and thank you.
It's only a pleasure. It's been a while since we last spoke, you and I. It was back in August of 2020.
Just as we were inching out of lockdown, COVID, and all the madness, we had a long chat about my last book, yes.
Correct. So that was a book that you co-authored with Kate Emerson. It was called How to Write Your Book in 100 Days. So did you complete this book in 100 days?
Well, I'm going to tell you that this particular book I wrote in 2 months. I wrote it in 2 months over lockdown after a commission to write my book by a publisher, but I will also say that I lived it over 10 years.
Yeah.
So it may have taken me 2 months to write, but it took 10 years to live and to process and to get to a point where I actually even wanted to share such a crazy, wild story with anybody.
I know when I started reading it, I thought either you're very brave or you've got a wonderful imagination, and we're just being sucked into this as being your real life story.
I've had many people say it reads like a novel. And of course, David, because I am a professional author. So, you know, I ghostwrite for celebrities or for thought leaders. So I did also bring to this book, which is actually my 14th book I've written, a massive amount of what storytelling really should be, which is immersive, fast, engaging, exciting. And I really, because the life I had lived, this experience was so absolutely mad. I didn't have to bring that much of that because what happened to me, to my husband, to our family, the journey we went on was so unexpected, unpredictable, and out there that, you know, truth is stranger than fiction.
It is indeed, because if you look at the cover, it says Love and Above, a journey into shamanism, coma, and joy. Now, I mean, that in itself tells you so many things because it touches on so much. People go, hang on a second, shamanism, not too sure, a bit of woohoo and ponytail here. And who's coma and why joy out of that? So how do you explain the book to people who have literally just picked it up and looked at the cover?
So when somebody says to me, what is this book about? I say, it's not about me. This is not a book about me. This is a book, and it's not about my husband, and it's not about cancer or death or being in a 3.5 week coma. All of these things are in the book. Yeah. But most particularly, this book is about how do you recreate your life when everything you thought you had or believed in is completely stripped away from you? How do you actually survive some of the most extreme things that can happen to human beings, and come out not just surviving, but in a place of what I call post-traumatic bliss, which is a place when after which I had a near-death experience. I was in the coma for 3.5 weeks and traveled to other worlds and had a soul journey. How do you come out of there and be so deliciously happy to be alive that you create the rest of your life and write it in a very different way to before you had this opportunity? So on a very basic level, the book is about the husband. The book is about my husband's 4-year journey with brain cancer, in which he decided to treat it in a way that involved a Sangoma African traditional medicine route. He treated it with prayer and ritual and ceremony and herbs and faith alongside Western medicine. And how I got more and more pulled into this world of what, and the cover is called shamanism. We in Africa know as Sangoma Nyangas, traditional African ways. Traditional cultures all over the world have these ways. Yeah. And how we got pulled, and I got pulled deeper and deeper into this world over the 4 years. And then what culminated in his coma as he was starting to leave his body and end his life through the brain cancer. And I went into a coma. My coma was unexpected, unpredictable, and the diagnosis was pneumonia. But I was on life support for 3.5 weeks. At the exact same time he was dying, I too was fighting for my life. And, just
sort of parallel
impossible
journeys, except you survived.
parallel.
Yeah.
I
How
survived.
did family and friends accept this? Because sometimes Western medicine is placed on a pedestal as the way and the light. And yet more and more people are turning not necessarily to homeopathic medicine, but to more culturally traditional ways of treating certain diseases. And let's not generalize and say all, but some. And they respond.
Yes, no, I think, Western medicine has such a place, and it did. So he had surgery, he was on radiation and had chemo. But that's really where the support of Western or allopathic medicine ended. It was within the halls of hospitals and within the tablets we took. There was no discussion about what is this illness? How do you live with it? How do you work with it? How do you integrate cancer in your life and still be alive?
Yeah.
Which is what other modalities, and certainly for him, as he started to work more deeply with a Sangoma by the name of Colin Campbell, and then he was moved to his brother who works in Botswana called Neil Campbell, started to work with. And really the preparation was working with two paths, living and dying. And how we also prepare to die, which what didn't happen in our conversations. And I say around my group, my table, where I'd come from. I was a journalist. This as well for me, I wanted facts and figures. I wanted to verify, which is what the first part of the book really, David, is about as well. It's really about the sense of me as a 34-year-old woman with 2 young children trying to control and understand cancer, and how do I go back to normal, and how do I get my life back, and not realizing back then when I was in that place and at that age that my life was never going to be the same again, and that control is an illusion, and that the best we can do on this wild journey of life
is hang on.
is hang on and understand that in these unexplored places is where the real living happens.
Yeah.
And I wasn't seeing that. So I was very angry at the beginning of the book. I'm angry. He's in Botswana. He's doing rituals. He's up in Venda. He's working with men. He's on mountains gathering herbs. I'm at home with 2 small
looking
children,
after small children,
doing school lifts, soccer lifts, cooking, cleaning, earning the money. And I'm desperately trying to go, let's go back to normal.
Yeah. And what is normal though?
And normal was getting further and further away from anything that we were experiencing.
How do you go about making yourself naked in a book? Because you did, you and it couldn't have been easy. You as a writer, you as a mother, you as a wife. How did you make the choice saying, I'm going to put this in, or I'm going to leave that out? Because the readers, if I put it in, the readers are going to go, oh yeah, now she's looking for a pity party. And if I leave it out, those who know me are going to say, but why did you leave it out? It was the most important part of those last years with your husband.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So my journey as an author and as a writer was I was always a humor columnist. So I've written very much and about a huge amount about, so I wrote for Cosmo, Women's Health, Men's Health. I wrote about my sex life. I wrote about my children. I did crazy things. I did water fasts. So I'm very, let me say, robust in terms of sharing deeply on personal things.
Right.
But this was so personal. And over the entire time that it happened, when my husband had brain cancer and we were up, I was in Botswana, I was dancing naked under the stars and chanting with beads and singing. And my friends said, and I regaled them at dinners, and they said, Sarah, you've got to write this. You're an author, you're a journalist, please write this. But David, I couldn't because I was in it.
Yeah.
After I came out of my coma and I told people and about where the soul journeys I went on, when the soul left the body, I was in coma for such a long time. People said, Sarah, write this. Please share this. And I did write that for some near-death experience journals. I spoke about it at 1 or 2 events, but I just couldn't put it on paper. And as the book ends up in Greece and the island of Tantra and love and sexuality and dance and ecstatic ritual, when I eventually just chose this different path in life, people were saying, Sarah, this is so hilarious. I cannot believe you're doing this. This is the maddest life I've ever heard. Write it. And I also couldn't.
Right.
But it came suddenly 10 years later with the real clarity of what had happened, that I knew that this was something I could finally share. And then I sat down and you're absolutely right. Almost 90% of what happened is left out. And what I chose were the pieces that really clicked in the heart of the story. Even my husband's entire 4-year cancer journey is 2 scenes. Both 2 fast scenes in the book.
Because otherwise people get bogged down in that sort of thing. And the book is not that. It's a joyous experience. It really and truly is. And people who think that it's not, go and buy the book and read it right through. And then you will see that it's almost a motivational self-help type of book, where you've said, this is what worked for me. Whether it works for you or not is another story. How did Tafelberg accept it when you took it to them?
So that's really interesting, because Tafelberg I'm just going to use the words, a very trade commercial publisher. However, I actually was asked to write the book because my story was fairly well known, and I'm had a lot of authors. I'm a literary agent. And I went with all these fabulous business books and etc. And I put them down for one of the publishers. I was pitching them, and they said, no, we actually want that story.
This is the one you want,
There's an appetite right now in the world for overcoming fear. And I think this book is very powerfully about that condition. It's very, very, very powerfully about how I lived in fear for a huge portion of my life. And after my near-death experience, and after death and losing my husband and cancer, I made this very, very deliberate choice to lift out of the vibration, which I call it, and many people call it fear, and make different choices, and to live and to choose adventure, bliss, delight, acceptance, gratitude.
All the positive stuff. We always focus on the negatives in our lives. And I suppose that COVID has taught us over the last almost 3 years, that there is a lot of negativity. But I think your book has come out at exactly the right time, because it teaches you that death is just part of the cycle. And for some reason, pre-2020, we feared death with a passion. We really did. Everybody is, oh, we're going to die. Yes, of course we're going to die. It's the scheme of things. It's the way we're genetically built, that we're going to die. But COVID has taught us that death is just part of what happens to us when we're living. Some die, unfortunately, sooner than others and for different reasons. But at the end of the day, this teaches you that there is another way, and that you can face it head on.
Absolutely. And have those and there's big words in this book. There's words none of us want in our lives. We don't want cancer. We don't want our loved ones to die. And there's a quote buried quite far in the book that was a huge, huge resource for me. It was by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And he said, there is nothing that can ever happen to you that is not in the realm of human experience. And I had that above my desk. And as I traveled after all these things, and people would say, Sarah, you must be so traumatized, and your children must be so traumatized. And you just, all the advice, like, this will pass, and keep calm, and stay safe, and keep on the medication, and keep going to your therapist, and all these things that sort of wished away the other side of death. And I sat one night, and this is in the book, after I'd come out of this 3.5-week coma, I'd fought for my life. My husband had died, and I sat still at home, still trying to learn to walk, learn to breathe. And I sat in this terrible state of terror, anxiety, fear, panic attack. And I just sat with that for a long time. I thought, well, what is this? Because I'm not scared of death, because I've been there. I transitioned to the other side. I came back. It's not death. And I I started to see that fear in itself can grab you and hold you so tight for so long. And I saw that, and I started to work with choosing something other than fear to dominate my life.
Yeah. Because FDR said it best, because he said, you have nothing to fear except fear itself. And as you've just pointed out, if you can overcome that, the fear of fear, then the road ahead, the huge boulders that you thought were in the road are merely stones that you can step over or walk around. They're not blocking the path. But I have to ask you, it would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you how your children accepted this. Did you discuss the book with them at all before you wrote it, or did they only see it once it was in sort of final draft?
So when this all happened, my children, when my husband passed away, my children were 7 and 9.
Yeah.
So that's when he died. I was in this. And over the time, they've had an extraordinary upbringing because I pulled them out of school. We moved to a Greek island. They were put in a tiny village school. So I'm going to say they're not your average children. They're exposed to, I think, a different lifestyle. We were at an Osho meditation center. We lived there. We went deeply into mindfulness and meditation. And at the same time, there has been great trauma in their lives because of what they have lived. When I wrote this book, they were very aware I was writing the book. I've spoken a lot about it. And, David, I often say to authors, who are you writing this book for? And I only knew the answer to myself when my daughter, I printed out the full manuscript. She's 18, and I gave it to her bound like this, and she took it, and I heard her on her bed, and she lay down and she didn't stand up for 5 hours. She read it from beginning to end, and I just heard this deep heart sobs coming out of her room for 5 hours. And that's when I knew who I'd written the book for, actually.
Yeah.
It was a small healing of my family, but what I didn't expect was how big the healing would be, how many people would read it, how deeply it would touch people. And so it was profoundly huge for her to read what happened. And my son, of course, is, kids, he's 17. He said, keep saying, Mom, I've got to page 123. And it's been like 2 months. So,
Well, at least he's reading it slowly, and I hope he's making notes in the column. Just on that 123 note, there was an author some years ago who wrote a book, and page 1 was 120. He started with page 123. And during an interview, he was asked why, and he said, because when people say, I've just started this book, started this morning, and I'm already on page 123. So I thought,
crazy.
Clever marketing ploy. The book is
lovely.
called Love and Above, A Journey into Shamanism, Coma, and Joy. It's by Sarah Bullen, and it is published by Tafelberg, and it's available all over the place. If you're about to get on an aircraft, just stop off at a bookstore in the airport, buy yourself a copy, and read it on the flight, because when you land on the other side, the flight will be over, you wouldn't have been bored, and you won't need to talk to the person in the seat next to you, because it's that type of book that will grab you and hold you. Sarah, thank you so very much. Time has flown by. I could talk to you for hours. I really and truly could. If people want to get in touch with you, if they decide that they too, like you, want to write a book, how do they do it?
They can look me up at thewritingroom.co.za, or they can Google Sarah Bullen. I come up and I work with authors all over the world to share their beautiful stories.
Great stuff. My guest today on In Conversation With has been author Sarah Bullen. Once again, Sarah, thank you so much for being on In Conversation With.